Hi guys, hello.
Hi,
Hi.
hi,
How are you?
Shilajit. Hi.
Hi. Taapsee, I start with this. Kanika had written Manmarzia for you, which was one of the most loved films of the last 4 5 years. I want to know what did you make of this particular script, because she's taken a similar dynamic, but placed it in a very crazy world of a murder mystery and with much more intriguing, messed up characters. What did you think of this idea?
I think she just added a murder in Manmarzia. That's what she did. And I kept telling her this the entire time I was shooting. And Vinil also, I was like, this can actually qualify to be Manmarzia part 2, because it's got like
Right.
crazy dynamics between the three characters, and all three are great, just like Manmarzia.
Hmm.
Just the setup is different,
Yeah.
background setup is different, and then there is a murder.
Right.
So she just added that, I feel, and yeah, I mean, it is intense. I mean, whenever it's Kanika writing a story about human relationships, it
Hmm.
has been intense. It
Right.
is not shallow,
Right.
especially because she brings so many unseen layers in a female's character that we haven't
Hmm.
explored. And
Hmm.
she starts looking at men also with a gaze, a female gaze, a lot of
Right.
times.
Right.
So which also gives a new dimension to the
Hmm.
male characters, which we
Hmm.
generally paint
Don't.
only as black or white, as a
Hmm.
hero or a villain. So
Hmm.
that's why the dynamics become very different when it is her film. And she's been lucky with the directors that she got, who understood her vision, who did not want to
Right.
like paint it black and white either, be it Anurag or Vinil, because
Hmm.
eventually it's
Hmm.
director's medium. So when a director
Right.
takes up a script like that, which is so tricky with
Hmm.
relationships, he has to be on the same page with Kanika. He has to accept that gray, that particular gray shade of of each character, and not spoil it
Right.
just in quest to make it more likable, or more
Right.
normal, so to say. So that way she's
Right.
been lucky with the directors also. And yeah, I mean, I've been, this is my second collaboration. I'm sure we're working together in the future as well.
Hmm.
And every time she writes something which is little weird, I think she's going to come to me.
Right. Right. I remember interviewing you a couple of years ago, I think for Fulton, and at the time we had a long chat about your love for your Jeep and going out and traveling and trekking, and it's spoken at length about that. I found it very interesting when your character enters this film. He's on his Jeep and he's a guy who is always on the move, and he's always vibing. I want to know, was this something easy for you to pick up, because I thought it was a very appropriate casting as well. Your last film was very different, with the Tesh character. He was much more out there, much more violent, all that. Was this something you felt was within your zone?
Yeah, Sheilajit ji, I think a few aspects were
Hmm.
parallel my universe, my world.
Hmm.
The river rafting, the love for outdoor,
Right.
and the love for adventure, being impulsive, and just going with the flow,
Right.
uh, kind of attitude. So I think these
Hmm.
things. I think most of us are like this. But yeah, a lot of my friends are noticing that, and they have
Huh.
messaged me that did I suggest rafting. I was like, भाई
Right.
मेरी इतनी सिचुएशन में है नहीं कि इंडस्ट्री में मैं बोलूँ कि इसमें राफ्टिंग डाल दो. तो उन लोगों को बड़ी
Right.
खुशी हुई, खासकर वो. So I used to go for river rafting for the last 10-12 years, and कई बार मैं बिना पैसे दिए भी उन लोगों ने मुझे entertain किया है. कई बार मैंने वहाँ पे रहने के लिए एज अ फोटोग्राफर मैंने
Hmm.
3-4 दिन शादियों में फोटो खींची है, तो मुझे उन्होंने फिर रिजॉर्ट में रहने दिया. This was in, I think, 2009 or 10. So all those people are so
Hmm.
happy to see me do this, and I'm glad that I spoke to you also about it. So all my close ones, they see the parallel, but
Hmm.
for the people who don't
Hmm.
know me,
Hmm.
only
Hmm.
this is going to be a
Right.
outward character.
Hi, Vikrant. Vikrant, it really struck me while watching the film. I later went through your filmography. Through your roles, you've gotten this nice opportunity to explore different shades of, masculinity, and especially Indian masculinity. And the
Yeah.
character in Gunj was very different. In Dolly Kitty was very different. A lot of, like Tapshi mentioned, a lot of these roles often written by women writers, and often female directors are at the
Yes.
helm. Has this been very enriching to explore different shades of all these characters, and different aspects of how they are?
Definitely, it's been very, very refreshing. I would want to consider myself very fortunate in
Hmm.
this case. I've worked with a lot of women writers and directors,
Yeah.
and even in this case, Kanika's observation or Kanika's point of view towards masculinity or toxic masculinity or the supposed definition of masculinity is, it sort of reflects at the fore with Rishu. Unfortunately, men are supposed to be a certain way, just the way women are expected to be a certain way. But she's someone who's shattered notions like throughout in her career, and she's very sure of what she sees the world as, and she's very good at that too. So with regards to Rishu, the definition of masculinity or the subdued commentary on Rishu's masculinity, and which you see throughout the film, you really have this character who's macho, who's bulky, who's like really flamboyant, who comes into the picture. So these are things which Kanika has a very keen eye on, and I personally also believe that our notion, unfortunately, patriarchy is primarily responsible for this really deep rooted thing within us, that we unfortunately have categorized and bracketed genders so much that it's really going to take a while for all of us to have a fresh perspective towards it. So I've always with Death in the Gunge or even with Rishu, I personally feel that this subdued commentary on toxic masculinity or how men are supposed to be is kind of spoken about. It's brought at the fore, and then you eventually leave it to the audiences, because you have to trust your audiences are really intelligent enough to take things back home, understand things. You really don't want to spoon feed things, but even if we are able to impact, say, 1 out of 10, I think we've done a decent job.
Taapsee, we've done a range of different work, but there's always been a natural pivot towards thrillers or, material of this nature. We've seen you in Game Over, in Badla. I want to know what excites you most about a script like this, where there's a crime layer underneath all, and at the same time, there are so many dynamics to a character, their relationships, things like that. Is that something you, intrinsically find very exciting about stories like this?
I think thriller is a very, very mass genre. Thriller and comedy. There are two genres I feel are mass genres, which are like loved across generations and across categories of people, right? So if you add thriller to any genre, like this is romantic thriller. Badla was out and out thriller. Game Over was a psychological thriller. So if you add any thriller to any kind of genre, it just by default makes it more gripping. If it's written well, that is. If it's a predictable one, then no one can say it really. So when I'm hearing a script, because I instantly say a yes or no. I make it a point never to go back and mull over it and come back and then say, analyze like pros and cons and overthinking. Because when you watch a film also, you instantly decide na pasand aayi ki nahi aayi. तुम कल थोड़ा ना बताते हो कि अच्छी लगी कि नहीं. So इसलिए I hear a script instantly if it has gripped me enough for the narration, if it's kept me on the hook as to like, okay, what is this character going to do or what is going to happen next. So I'm sold. So this is what happens with thrillers a lot of times, that they grip you so much that I'm engaged for the 2 hours and I end up saying a yes. But I make sure that I don't do more than one thriller in a year at least, so that my audience doesn't get bored of watching me in similar genre. So that is why I like, at least in this film, I've gotten the help of the love story to dilute the thriller bit. So I'm hoping that the audience will not really get like bored of the thriller, because Badla was quite a different thriller than this one. This has a different dimension, and I mean, I get attracted towards weird stuff. Let's just say that.
I'll ask all three of you. There was a time when directors like Abbas Mastan would be making these lavish romantic thrillers, set in faraway locations or on expensive yachts and things like that. I found it very interesting that you have a story like this, and the setting of a small town, and not just a small town, but 60% of it is around a house, and there's so much of threat and natural help coming from all directions just from the setting. It's hard to think of mutton curry in a similar way after watching the film. What did you guys make of the setting, and how Vinil has used that space instead, inside the house, the exteriors, a large part there's a recurring scene just outside the door. These are common settings, but in the zone of a thriller, in the zone of a mystery, they have so much of threat and portent to them.
Small town is a character in itself, especially because we probably are born and brought up in India, so we feel that Indian small towns have a character like that. It has if you use the space properly, it has a character of its own. And Vinil had really done a lot of research in selecting this kind of a house, this kind of an area where he can film the 60% of the film in one house and around it and not make it look jaded or bored. So that way, the credit goes to him about it. But then Indian Heartland has so many, emotions that so many times when I go back to Delhi, certain areas of Delhi, because I'm from there, I get so emotional by just looking at certain lanes. It's got that, you get that feeling of, the vintage feeling of some kind of an emotion when you see certain kind of localities. And that's what happens when you go to Heartland India. It is a character in itself. And we have seen so much of Heartland lately, but this is a different way of looking at the Heartland of India always had certain heightened emotions. We have become in cities, we have become a slightly more diplomatic and mellowed down in a lot of ways, but the heartland is still very of India is still very obsessive and very dramatic in a lot of ways, and that works well for the film.
Harsh and Vikrant, I'll end with this, not to spoil anything, but there's a very intense scene where you guys, have a confrontation for the first time, and it does not take place in where the film is set. It takes place a little away from there. I want to know, how was it shooting that scene? Was there a lot of boiling tension between these two male characters? But in the setting of the house, it's always, in harsh tones, but in that scene, and also the setting of the scene is Noida. And I found it very interesting of how it just comes out and boils out, with both of your characters. You could talk a little bit about shooting that one.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think that was the only time that Harsh and I were shooting together for a day, and that was, it was wonderful in a lot of ways, because in the narrative you see कि एक ये character है जिसको अब पता चला है उसकी wife के और इसके relation के बारे में, and then he's going through a gamut of emotions. There is so much he's going through. He's just kind of processing things, and he is like anyone else, that man who has his ego in place, who has his self-respect in place. It's kind of complex. You really cannot pick out one thing and sort of say, okay, what made him do this or that. And that's a very crucial juncture in the film. Like any other person, like be it a man or a woman, I think generically anyone is bound to have an outburst. It is only after the outburst that you sit back and sort of analyze ki acha, with a little saner head, कि मैंने क्या किया या मैंने ऐसे क्यों किया या आगे क्या करना है जिंदगी में. And it was fantastic. It was lovely working with him. Harsh is a thorough professional, and he's always very accommodating. To an extent that he really does not mind taking half a step behind to accommodate the larger interest at play, which very seldom happens, especially with actors. And that's a very, very wonderful quality. It also helps bring out the other person's best. And it's a wonderful quality and trait that he possesses. And it was such a crucial scene. You see this man walking with a screwdriver, wanting to kill him at one point, but then at the end of the day, you realize he's physically weaker than this guy. And when these brothers are sitting and having a chat, he says, it's so, like, for the lack of a better word, it is so stimulating to the audiences also. Like, I'm sure you must have seen the mutton curry sequence when Rani breaks the news to him. So I think it is somewhat similar that, after the altercation, these brothers are sitting and, he says, and the ambiguity sort of enhances the character and the narrative as a whole, that, कम से कम उसी को तुम उसके साथ क्यों नहीं भागे? कम से कम हम तीनों में से तुम दोनों तो खुश रह पाते. And it, this particular line speaks volumes about what is going internally with this guy. And, I generally have this, tilt towards complexities. So I really, really enjoyed this entire sequence, which only helped further the thriller romantic narrative. It's, as you see, then you move to the pre-climax.
Harsh, for you shooting this one, I know your body language is very interesting. He's obviously the bulkier guy there, and but he's also respectful. He keeps saying Rishu Bhaiya, and he's trying to accommodate that, but he's also hurt. And in the end, he responds by fighting. There's a lot of things going on in that scene. Tell me about it. How was it shooting and designing this?
When we were watching it, calling him Rishu Bhaiya was also thought of, by Vinil. And when I discussed with him, like, what was our childhood like, what did I like grow up calling him, and how much time have we spent with each other? So that Bhaiya, adding a Bhaiya with the physicality that has been shown in the film, Though Vikrant, with his skill and craft, he can look really big when he wants to. But that's up to a film. And this film, he had to look a certain way. So physicality, there was a stark contrast created by the director. And to add that, Bhaiya was Vinil sir's call, and I really enjoyed that contrast. That you're physically
Yeah.
kind of overpowering in some scenes, but then you're also calling him Bhaiya. So these things were really created very well on the set by the director and written so well. About that scene, I don't know if I can talk about it since people haven't seen it, but Chant has explained everything to you. About the locations, I really like your observation. How
It
different
adds a
locations.
dimension. Yeah.
I am from a small town, and I know the importance of a terrace in one's youth, because it's like a chessboard. You connect with um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. 8 blocks. So you connect with 8 terraces, and there are 8 possibilities of stories flourishing. So there was a little story I was involved in, where there are exchanges of letters, all Hindi mein likhe hue letters in a small town. Then you go to your seniors and hand over the letter, and you're like, इसका क्या मतलब है, और इसका मतलब, फिर वो आपको समझाते हैं. All these things. जो वरांडे का एक अलग story होती है. वरांडे में there's a different feel to a veranda, to an angan. So there's a different story to every location in a small town. City में वो थोड़ा कम हो जाता है. It's always about the room and the balcony, just two. But small towns में बहुत सारे variables होते हैं. And I think that's very smartly integrated in the script. Every location has been used very differently. So I feel that was something very, very attractive for me. जब मैं आनंद एल राय सर को मैं मिला था इस फिल्म के लिए, मैंने उनको सबसे पहले यही कहा था. मैंने कहा, सर, I'm a big fan of the terrace and all the things which happen around terrace in a small town. So I hope a lot of viewers will be able to relate to that, especially if they're from a small town.
ये जो इंसिडेंट होता भी है दोनों भाइयों के बीच में नोएडा में, जो ये इंसिडेंट होता है, if you actually see, Rishu is someone who's very shy, very reserved. वो बहुत ही एक पैरामीटर के वितिन जीता है. But you suddenly see him go to Noida and do that thing in front of, say, 30 people, including kids and families. That is such a stark contrast. You see someone who's almost closeted with his expressions, he does not express much, to him stepping out of his house, almost borderline criminal activity, doing it in front of the world. So that arc and that range also complements the narrative as a whole. And these were little things which Vinil added. Vinil wanted kids to be around, parents to be around, and you see parents pulling away their kids and tugging them in, because there is an insane guy who's out there with a screwdriver to kill someone. And that's how it is. So Vinil, I think, needs to be credited a lot with the design of the scene.
I'm out of time. Thank you so much, guys. All the best for Haseen Dillruba.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shivaji.
Thank you.